Before you continue watching, let me ask you something simple. You're going to discover why the smallest act of kindness toward an animal can mean more than most people realize. Most of the time, these animals are invisible to those walking past. But for them, every day is a challenge. Animals cannot ask for help. They wait and hope that someone somewhere will notice them. When someone finally stops and pays attention, that moment can completely change an animal's life. Maybe you've left water out or shared food with a stray. To them, those small actions feel enormous. It means relief after days without food and safety after a long period of fear and struggle. Stories like these exist everywhere. Subscribe to see more meaningful stories like this one. Every day we encounter animals that need help, and every day someone makes a choice. Some people continue walking, others assume someone else will step in, but sometimes one person stops. One person decides that even a small act of kindness is worth their time, and that's where something remarkable begins. Compassion has a way of changing more than just the moment. It reminds us that empathy still exists. Animals rely on that empathy more than we realize. Their survival often depends on the kindness of humans they cross paths with. Maybe you gave food or water, maybe you rescued one. Every small act matters. Have you ever helped an animal in a small way? Share your story in the comments. You might inspire someone else. Because the most important change begins with something incredibly simple: choosing to notice. One person choosing to care can start a story that no one expected. Let's start that story today. Are you just another passerby, or are you someone different? At that point, many people continue walking, not necessarily because they don't care, but because life often feels busy and complicated. People assume someone else will help, or they tell themselves the situation isn't as serious as it looks. But sometimes something inside you says, wait. Something tells you to stop for a moment. And when you decide to pause, the situation begins to change. Maybe you walk a little closer, slowly and carefully, so the animal doesn't feel threatened. Maybe you kneel down slightly to appear less intimidating. Your movements become gentle and calm because you understand that sudden actions might frighten it away. The animal watches everything. Its ears move slightly, reacting to sounds around it. Its eyes remain fixed on you, trying to determine whether you are safe. Every step you take becomes part of the message you are sending. Animals are incredibly sensitive to body language. They notice the tone of a voice, the speed of a movement, and the distance a person keeps. When someone approaches calmly and respectfully, animals often begin to sense that there may not be danger. Still, trust doesn't appear instantly. Fear is a powerful instinct, especially for animals that have spent their lives surviving alone. Many of them have experienced difficult encounters with humans before, so their caution is not unreasonable. But something interesting happens when a person chooses patience instead of rushing the moment. The atmosphere changes. You might place a small amount of food on the ground or leave a bowl of water nearby. Then you step back, giving the animal space to decide what to do next. Now the choice belongs to the animal. For a few seconds, nothing happens. The animal continues watching, evaluating the situation. Its body remains tense, prepared to run if necessary. But hunger, thirst, and curiosity slowly begin to compete with fear. Then, very carefully, the animal takes a step forward. It pauses again, looking around, making sure there are no sudden dangers nearby. Another step follows. Moments like this are quiet but powerful. This is where fear and hope meet. Building trust with a stray animal is incredibly delicate. Every movement matters. The animal watches you carefully, remembering the harsh lessons of survival on the streets. The best thing you can do is stay calm and patient, allowing the situation to unfold naturally. If you move too quickly, fear could take over. But kindness, given slowly, starts to bridge the gap. Eventually, hunger becomes stronger than fear. The animal takes another cautious step forward, then another. Finally, it reaches the food. That first bite carries enormous meaning. It's a moment where the struggle pauses. As the tension fades, curiosity begins. The animal starts to realize that your presence might be safe. Trust doesn't appear instantly, but curiosity is the first step. You remain patient. You don't rush the interaction or try to force closeness. Instead, you simply stay nearby, allowing the animal to understand that nothing threatening is going to happen. Animals communicate through observation, watching every movement carefully. They learn about safety through repeated experiences. Every second that passes without danger becomes evidence that the situation is different from what they feared. For animals who have lived in uncertainty, this is incredibly important. It teaches them that kindness can exist. And once that realization begins to form, even in a small way, the entire atmosphere of the moment changes. The animal may finish the food and move away slightly, but it doesn't disappear completely. Instead, it stays within sight, watching again. But this time, the expression is different. The fear is no longer as strong. And in that quiet exchange of glances, a fragile connection begins to form. One built on patience, calmness, and the simple decision to care. What started as a brief encounter between a human and a struggling animal is slowly turning into something much more meaningful. Because once trust begins to grow, even in the smallest amount, the story is no longer just about survival. It becomes the beginning of something entirely new. After that first moment of cautious trust, the relationship between the human and the animal slowly begins to change. The situation is no longer just a brief encounter between strangers. Instead, it becomes a quiet connection that develops over time. At first, the changes are very small. The animal that once stayed far away might now remain a little closer. Instead of immediately running when a person appears, it pauses and watches. The fear that once controlled every movement begins to soften, replaced by a careful curiosity. Animals remember experiences and use them to navigate their worlds safely. If someone returns again with the same calm behavior, the animal begins to recognize patterns. It starts to understand that this person's presence often means something positive rather than threatening. Recognition is one of the first signs that trust is beginning to form. The animal may notice the sound of familiar footsteps or the tone of a voice that it has heard before. Instead of hiding, it stays nearby, observing with more confidence than before. This kind of progress might not seem dramatic, but for an animal that has lived in survival mode, it represents a huge step forward. Every small moment of safety helps rebuild a sense of security that may have been missing for a long time. When the person returns again, the animal might approach a little sooner. It may sit quietly nearby while food is placed on the ground. Its body language begins to change in subtle ways. The muscles that once stayed tense begin to relax. Its movements become slower and less defensive. Trust is beginning to replace fear. When kindness appears consistently, their understanding of the world begins to shift. They start to realize that not every human is a threat. That realization can change everything. One of the most emotional moments arrives when the animal finally feels comfortable enough to come very close. Maybe it steps within arm's reach for the first time. The animal watches the hand closely. Then, the animal allows the briefest touch. That short contact represents a remarkable victory for trust. Beneath every frightened animal is a living being capable of trust, comfort, and connection. It starts to become a shared journey, one where we discover how powerful compassion can truly be. As time goes on, the connection that began with a simple act of kindness slowly becomes something deeper. What once felt like a brief moment of concern begins to grow into a quiet routine. The person who first stopped to help now finds themselves returning again, sometimes without even planning to. At first, it might be just to check if the animal is still there. Maybe you walk past the same place the next day, curious about whether the dog or kitten you noticed before is nearby. When you see it again, something inside you feels relieved. The animal notices you too, and this time it doesn't react with the same level of fear. Instead, it watches you with a calm awareness. Animals have an incredible ability to remember those who treat them kindly. Even after a short time, they begin to recognize familiar faces, sounds, and behaviors. For animals that live without consistent care, this recognition can become an important part of their daily lives. When you return, the animal may approach sooner than before. It might not run away when you get close. Instead, it stays where it is, observing with quiet patience. If food appears again, the animal's confidence grows stronger. It eats more comfortably, glancing up occasionally, but without the intense fear that once controlled every movement. With each passing day, the distance between you becomes smaller. What once required careful patience now begins to feel natural. The animal might sit nearby while you place food down. It may follow you for a few steps when you start to leave. Sometimes it simply remains in the same place, watching you as if it understands that you will return again. This sense of routine can be incredibly meaningful for an animal that has lived without stability. Street animals often face unpredictable days. Food may appear one day and disappear the next. Safe places to rest may be temporary. Loud noises, unfamiliar people, and sudden dangers are all part of their daily environment. But when a human begins to return regularly with kindness, something powerful begins to change. The animal starts to feel a sense of reliability. It begins to understand that certain moments in its day are no longer uncertain. Someone will come, food will appear, kindness will exist, even if only for a short time. That realization slowly transforms the animal's behavior. You may begin noticing new signs of comfort. A kitten that once hid under a car may step forward confidently instead of remaining in the shadows. These small changes are powerful reminders of how much animals are capable of adapting when they feel safe. Their personalities begin to emerge. The animal that once seemed quiet and frightened might reveal playful energy. It might explore the area more freely. For the person helping, these moments can feel deeply rewarding. Watching an animal slowly recover its sense of security is something that stays with people for a long time. It reminds us that kindness has real impact. Even simple gestures repeated over time can rebuild trust that once seemed impossible. And sometimes, the connection grows strong enough that the situation begins to change even further. The person helping may begin thinking about the animal's long-term safety. Questions start appearing naturally. Does the animal have a safe place to sleep? Is it healthy? Could it benefit from medical care or a permanent home? These thoughts often mark the point where a simple act of kindness begins turning into something more meaningful. Because once we truly see an animal struggle, it becomes difficult to ignore it again. Helping no longer feels like a small moment. It begins to feel like a responsibility. And in many stories like this, that growing sense of responsibility becomes the beginning of a completely new chapter for the animal's life. What started as a brief moment of kindness slowly turns into something far more meaningful. The person who once simply stopped to help now finds themselves thinking more seriously about the animal's future. It's no longer just about leaving food or water. The situation begins to feel personal. You start noticing more details. Maybe the animal looks thinner than it should. Maybe you see a small injury or signs that it has been struggling for a long time. These observations create a new question in your mind. What happens to this animal when no one is around? For many people, this is the moment when compassion turns into action. Some begin contacting local animal shelters or rescue groups to ask for advice. Others try to arrange veterinary care if the animal appears sick or injured. Sometimes, the person helping even decides to take the animal home, offering a safe place where it no longer has to survive alone. These decisions don't always happen instantly. They often grow out of the connection that has been forming over time. The more you see the animal, the more you understand its personality, its habits, and the challenges it faces every day. And the animal senses this change too. When trust has fully developed, the once frightened creature behaves very differently. A dog that once kept its distance may now walk beside the person comfortably. A kitten that once hid from everyone might curl up nearby, finally feeling safe enough to relax. These transformations are powerful reminders of how resilient animals can be when they are given even a small chance. But perhaps the most important lesson in stories like this is how simple everything began. There was no complicated plan, no dramatic rescue at the start, just one quiet moment where someone noticed something others ignored. One person chose to stop instead of walking past. One person decided that a small act of kindness was worth their time. Because animals cannot ask for help with words, they rely on observation, instinct, and hope. Hope that someone will eventually see them and care enough to act. Sometimes that person is you. So let me ask you again, just like we did at the beginning of this video, where are you watching from today? People from all over the world are seeing this story right now. Different countries, different cultures, different lives, but one thing connects all of us. Animals exist everywhere, and opportunities to show kindness exist everywhere too. Maybe one day you'll notice an animal quietly waiting in a place where others keep walking. If that moment ever happens, remember something simple. You don't need to do something big to make a difference. Sometimes a small act, a bowl of water, a little food, or simply taking the time to care can change an entire life. And sometimes, it all begins with one person who chooses to notice.